Well, welcome everyone. My name is Martin Sanchez-Jankowski, and I'm co-chair of the Meyer Center. And I, of course, am officially welcoming you all to our event today. But before we begin, I would like to make an announcement of an upcoming event on Thursday, April 28th, from 3:30 to 5 p.m. The ISSI's Graduate Fellows Program will present a panel entitled, quote, "Constrained Choices, Stratification and Mobility in Education," close quote. It will feature presentations by two graduate fellows, including one by Caitlin Kalia. Where is Caitlin? Okay. I hope I didn't butcher your name.
Great.
Who is a Meyer Center graduate fellow and a PhD student in ethnic studies. And her presentation will be entitled, quote, "Unsettling Domesticity, Native Women Challenging U.S. Indian Policy in the San Francisco Bay Area, 1918 to 1936, close quote. And the event will be held in the Troy Duster Conference Room of ISSI, which is on the other part of the Institute on the other side. So you would enter to get into those facilities from the Bowditch side. Now, I'd like to thank our co-sponsors for today's event. They are the American Indian Graduate Student Association, American Indian Graduate Program.
Woohoo!
Yeah. a double, Carmen. The Department of Ethnic Studies and the Native American Studies program within it, and the Native American Student Development Program. Now, let me take this opportunity, please, to remind you all to check your phones right now and make sure that they're in the silent mode. Once I made that announcement, sat down, and mine rang. So I don't want to embarrass myself nor you and try to fumble for these things. The format for today's event is that our speaker will address us for around 50 to 60 minutes, and when completing, I will re-emerge from my seat here and stand up here and take your hands and write them down, and not literally your hands, but I'll recognize your hands, write them down, and then you'll be called on to ask our speaker questions in the queue. So I'll set the queue, and then all she has to do is answer those questions. Let me introduce our speaker today. Our speaker is Reina Ramirez, who is Associate Professor of Anthropology at the University of California, Santa Cruz. She received her BA right here at UC Berkeley, and has friends to support her right here. And her MA and PhD degrees from Stanford University. We won't hold her accountable for that. She is a scholar and a member of the Winnebago tribe of Nebraska. She has research interests in a number of areas, including Ho-Chunk biography, urban Native Americans, transnationalism, Native feminism, gender and culture, citizenship. She is currently developing a book manuscript which focuses on a native feminist approach to family tribal history, and of course we'll excitedly await the completion of that. But today, she's going to share with us some of her findings based on her book, Native Hubs, Culture, Community, and Belonging in Silicon Valley and Beyond. Please welcome Ms. Professor Ramirez.
Well, before I begin, first I just want to thank everyone for the invitation, and everyone who's here. Christine Trost, I want to say thank you for reaching out and contacting me, and Cynthia. I'm really excited to be here because this is where I got my bachelor's. So go Cal Bears. A lot of great memories. My roommate Janet's here. Vita's here. No, we had a really strong Native cohort of students that were all here at the same time, and it really was a blast. I really had a lot of fun. And I also want to just give a thank you to the indigenous people of the area, the Muwekma-Ohlone, who are part of this book that I wrote. What I'm going to be talking about is Native Hubs, Culture, Community, Belonging in Silicon Valley and Beyond. It is based on my dissertation research. Got me tenure, which is always a good thing. So the central figure of the book is this amazing woman, Laverne Roberts. Hopefully some of you have met her. She was the founder of the American Indian Alliance, based in San Jose, California. And I first heard about Laverne. I was co-chair of SNAGS, the Native American graduate group at Stanford, and got invited to a meeting. And so I attended the meeting, and at that point, I didn't think I was going to be writing about urban Native Americans. I thought I was going to be writing about Native high school students, because the work that got me into graduate school was working with Native high school students as part of Indian clubs, part of the Indian education program. But when I went to that first meeting, I just really fell in love with Laverne, and I just wanted to hang out with her, basically. I just loved being with her and meeting everybody. It was just this really warm, amazing experience to be involved in the growth of the American Indian Alliance. And as I was doing the research, I really wanted to follow in her footsteps, because I thought this idea of the American Indian Alliance was really exciting. And I really wanted to do a different type of ethnography that really saw Native people as intellectuals in their own right. I was studying with Renato Rosaldo, and of course he encouraged me to do this. So as I was doing the research and I interviewed Laverne, she basically told me about how urban Indian culture, what it was all about. And she described this idea of the hub. And basically she talked about how she came out on relocation, and right away she met urban Native Americans. And so she said that immediately she got involved with other Native Americans in the city, and all this growth happened with powwows and sweat lodge ceremonies, as well as meetings, family gatherings. So after listening to her concept of the hub, I realized it was this geographic concept that the way urban Indian culture was supported was through Native Americans actually meeting together in these geographic places. So that was the first thing I realized. And then I also realized that it wasn't just a geographic concept that she was describing to me, because basically what she told me was that you had to think of the hub as kind of like a wheel. And the urban area was the center, and then there are these spokes that all reached out into people's reservations, pueblos, and rancherias, and that people would travel back and forth from the reservation to the city, or they would phone call, or they'd be reading tribal newspapers online. And so after listening to her, I realized that the hub was not only a geographic concept, but it was also a virtual concept. And I use this term virtual because this was based in Silicon Valley. This American Indian Alliance was based in Silicon Valley, and so this idea of it being virtual made a lot of sense to me. And the thing that was really interesting as I was working on this concept, what she described to me was so much more sophisticated compared to what I was reading in the urban Indian literature, which was very problematic. I also realized that there was a transnational context to this idea of the hub. As I was doing the research, a really good friend of mine, Marta Frausto, who we all went to Cal together. She's a very good friend. She's owed to me, and she got her degree from Native American Studies here. She was telling me a lot about indigenous people from Mexico in California. And as I was doing this research, I realized I couldn't write a book unless I also included the transnational experience from Mexico, because it just didn't seem right. And she had already introduced me to some of her friends, especially some Mixtec women. I'm not fluent in Spanish, but my daughter is. And she actually was born here. She was born in Alta Bates. So she has, and she will be she'll be getting her MSW next year. Her name's Mirasol, so I'm sure you'll meet her. So she'll be in the MSW program.
Awesome.
Martha introduced me to some Mixtec women, and they also told me that Mixtecs are the largest indigenous group here in California. And so with my daughter's help, who's fluent in Spanish, we did some interviews of also Mixtec women to incorporate into the book. And so that was this really amazing experience to do some interviews with my daughter. I mean, it was just really phenomenal. And I wanted to organize the book in respect of Laverne Roberts. The American Indian Alliance, the purpose of the organization was try to create communication across some differences and tensions within the community. And so talking to people, I realized that there were some tensions between mixed bloods and full bloods, federally acknowledged and non-acknowledged, Native youth and adults, and then U.S. and Mexican indigenous peoples. And so I organized the book trying to create some understanding across these groups. I was also part of an oral history project, and that was one of the purposes of the project, was to record people's stories, and then people could read people's stories, and then there could be some understanding across these differences. So that was why the book is organized the way it is. So here's one of the women who's in the book, highlighted, and Leonore, who was interviewed. And hearing the stories of those Mixtec women was pretty heartbreaking. Their experience of crossing the border, it was very, very dangerous, being undocumented at that time. So I was really grateful, with my daughter's help, to try to create some understanding between U.S. and Mexican indigenous people, because often, there is a language barrier. And I also wanted this to be following a hemispheric consciousness, that there needs to be understanding across differences throughout the Americas. And as I was introduced, I'm working on this family tribal history project about my grandparents, which I'm grateful to say I have a draft of the whole book at this point. I'm really grateful about that. But what I found out was my grandparents also had a hemispheric consciousness. They did a college preparatory high school in Wichita, Kansas. My grandfather was Ho-Chunk, my grandmother was Ojibwe, and they invited people from across the border to participate. So I guess this was just something that's been part of my family history, that these national borders shouldn't cause all kinds of divisions within our community. So, as I said earlier, when I was hearing about this idea of the hub, I realized that it was so much more exciting than what I was reading about urban Native Americans. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to put the hub in dialogue with all the different kinds of literatures to show how theoretically robust this concept is. So I put it in dialogue with the diaspora literature, basically this idea that Native people in urban areas, they have this diasporic consciousness, which just means you have this sense of connection to the city as well as to your tribal homelands, that you can feel this connection across great distances. And that this is really different than what the urban Indian literature portrayed. I also put it in dialogue with the transnationalism literature. I had a really good friend who was from Mexico. I went to Stanford with. His name is Federico Becerril. And we were at a conference in New York City, and I just remember we were having this conversation in the New York subway, and he was talking about how Mixtecs, because he wrote books about the Mixtecs, how they were transnationals. And as I was talking to him, I realized, urban Native Americans are transnationals because basically we have a connection to our tribal nations, and we crossed the reservation border to come to the city. And so this idea that Native Americans in cities are also transnationals, along with other indigenous people who have crossed these national borders, but to highlight that we are members of our tribal nations. And by calling urban Native Americans transnationals, I think it gives a much more correct picture of what it's like to be a Native person living in the city. And so basically this notion of transnationalism is that we maintain this connection to our tribal nation, our tribal identity, our connections to our homelands, reservations, village, pueblos, and rancherias. And then it really complicates the literature that really is focusing on migrants' relationships with the nation state rather than indigenous people away from their tribal homelands. So I've been also talking about how the hub is just so much more robust compared to the urban Indian literature. The old literature saw Native people as this dysfunctional, alcoholic. There'd be all these, you'd read these books and it's all about Native people in the Indian bars. And there wasn't really a validation that Native people were maintaining connections with their tribal homelands. And it was this idea that somehow our culture is incarcerated in the land, using Appadurai's idea. So basically the hub challenges this old literature, and it really is highlighting that Native people, we travel and we carry who we are as tribal people with us. And I know growing up, I definitely lived a hub existence. Every summer, I would go with my mother and we'd go back to my reservation in Winnebago, Nebraska, and we participated in naming ceremonies and the annual powwow when we visit our relatives. My mother ended up going back to school as an older student after she was on Alcatraz. So that would be another example of a hub, was all Native Americans gathering together on Alcatraz. And for her it was it was really a time of empowerment, her time on Alcatraz. And from there, she decided to get her PhD. So we would do this circuit we would leave. She was like a substitute teacher all year, saving up our money, and then we'd be gone all summer, and we would basically go visit all her artist friends, all her native artist friends, and then go to our reservation, and then also visit people in Wichita, Kansas, which is where this college preparatory high school was located, and there were still relatives living there. So also put this, so you can see, I'm talking about all these literatures because I really want to highlight how powerful the hub is. This is this super powerful concept that completely blew apart the old urban Indian literature. So I put the idea of the hub in relationship with this notion of the multi-layered citizen by Neera Yuval Davis. Basically that as citizens we are connected on multiple layers, our tribal nations, the U.S. nation state, and that you need to look at our citizenship in a multi-layered manner. And by doing that, then you can also highlight that we are members of our tribal nations. And so also, while I was in graduate school, the first year, I took a course called Cultural Citizenship with Renato Rosaldo, and I was very, very interested in his concept. He did this with a group of Latinos, but what I was interested is thinking about belonging from a Native perspective. What does that mean? And so I basically, thinking about Native people, it's thinking about our relationship in multiple locations. I used gender to complicate it because if you don't, usually citizenship is based on this male notion of citizenship. It's about your involvement in politics in the public sphere. But if you put gender involved in it, then you can think about people's right to belong in the home, the community, the tribal nation, and the nation state. And the reason why this is really important is because often Native women are struggling with violence, a lot of domestic violence. So we have a right to fully belong wherever we are, including the home. And so by using this notion of a gendered notion of politics and belonging, I also want to include the importance of emotion, spirituality, because in order to belong, often we have to get angry to claim our rights. We have to get angry and say, this isn't right. I shouldn't have to be dealing with domestic violence, or my children should be respected in the schools. There shouldn't be a Native American mascot in a high school. And often it means we have to get angry. And so emotions are something that's really important, as well as spirituality. In order to feel like we really belong, we're also involved in our indigenous spirituality. So Marta Frausto, she was here at Cal too at the same time. So I guess she's here with us, even though she lives in Fresno. She's been really involved in her own organization, the Otomi. She's organized her family. They travel, they go back to Mexico, and there was this important symposium that was in a transnational hub, and it was for both U.S. and Mexican indigenous people, and it was held in Fresno, California. And so this was it was an important event because we had people from both sides of the border talking about their rights, talking about what they were struggling with. And it was the way they were able to have understanding was everyone was wearing these headphones, and there was a translator. So that way, both you could hear English, you could hear Spanish, and you were able to meet and talk. And a lot of important issues came up. A lot of the indigenous people were struggling with not being documented, being deported. So they were talking about working in the fields, it not being safe for women. Often there's rape in the fields. So there was a lot of very important issues that were brought up. And there were also issues from the U.S. indigenous standpoint. Ron and Rita Alec, they've been disenrolled. This is a huge issue in California, where a lot of our California indigenous people have been disenrolled. And so that issue was brought up. And unfortunately, because of casinos, there's families that are disenrolled. So that was brought up at this meeting. And then also the plight of people who are not recognized or not federally acknowledged. We have so many Native people, because of the treaties, were never ratified. We're on Muwekma Ohlone land, and they're not federally acknowledged, which means they don't have access to a land base or different treaty rights that they should have. So, for example, I'm a member of the Winnebago tribe of Nebraska, and we have a reservation. We have a lot of economic development that's been happening. One of our members, Lance Morgan, got an MBA at Harvard, and so he came back and has been doing all kinds of economic development for our tribe. So there's a lot of resources that my people have access to, but then if you're not federally recognized, it's a whole different situation. I'm teaching at UCSC and the Amamutsin. They're not federally recognized. They're very active and doing a lot of work, but they're always fighting to try to get that federal recognition. So this particular issue came up at this meeting. So the purpose of this book was to really for community healing, for understanding, for communication across differences, to really validate and valorize Laverne Roberts and her intellectual concept. I mean, I just was the person who heard her story and heard her talk about the hub, and my role was just to really put it out in the world and say, here's an important indigenous concept. I have a lot of respect for Laverne, and I feel like this is a concept that's very, very important in Indian country. And her whole idea of trying to bring the community together across differences, I think, is really important. She's moved back to Fort Yarrington Colony. A lot of Native people who live in the city, often they go back home to their reservations or their rancherias, or in this case, her colony. She's Paiute. So as I give this talk, and every time I give a talk, I'm always thinking about Laverne and all the people that I met as doing this research, that they touched my life, my family's life, and I think all this is really, really exciting. So I think I'm going to stop there.
Okay, please keep your hands up, and I'll just put you in a queue, and then you can and then I'll call on you. Please.
Well, Oki Nixikoa, Nistu Midaniko, Okstukuma Nistum, Skati Pikani Nistu Ganaxtimida. I greet you in my language because I am a transnational, the epitome of it. I come from the Siksikaia Tepi, which is 4 tribes that existed before the United States and before Canada. And our origin stories are on our place of land where we are. But 3 tribes are in Alberta and 1 is in Montana. And I went to school here at Berkeley. I'm a recovering urban Indian, recovering Catholic, recovering social worker. So this is profound because in the sense, my Siksikaia to be our confederacy in the next 50 years will be very prominent because the source of water comes from our Aboriginal land. In the next 50 years, the most precious commodity will be water. We just recently signed a buffalo treaty on our land with everyone who has a buffalo herd, and we're lending you at the Oakland Zoo 20 of our calves because 140 years ago, one of our smart people put our genetically pure buffalo on an island up in Alberta for 140 years because they said, you know, they're going to go a little bit crazy. While they're going crazy, we're going to make sure the buffalo are still alive. And we just brought 87 of those calves down into America because the only place in America that those buffaloes can survive is on our land right now. And we're lending 20 to this zoo because we have this concept about, and it's in the prophecies. All of our ancestors' prophecies said that we won't come back to whole health until the buffalo return. So we're lending 20 calves here, and when they have offspring, they'll go back to our reservation. So I was thinking about this because I work on both sides, and I'm constantly hopping back and forth. Because they have the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that interviewed 6,000 First Nations Native people in Canada, and they came out with the 94 recommendations in December. And you should have it with me. I've been carrying it around, but because their prime minister just put something like $8.4 billion into those 94 recommendations, which the U.S. can understand, but because we're transnational, but the United States and Canada is not. They don't even talk to each other. That we have different television, we have different, and art is bizarre. But the only way that we organize, like when we had a treaty signing 2 years ago, and we didn't invite the United States and we didn't invite Canada. And this is the first where we just invited people at herds of buffalo. And so we're actualizing it without any government interference. So this concept, because I think as we go, that transnational is the answer to a lot of things. Because we would benefit, because you're closer to Mexico, okay? And Spanish speaking. So that's your influence. We're different because no one is trying to sneak across our border. Our reservation is 65 miles of border. And there's drones and stuff, but we don't have the issue because, so there's a whole nother set of politics with that. So I think that this idea, and so I was sitting here and I was not only proud of you, proud of you because what Berkeley taught us to do is think, think and write. That's all they taught us, think and write. And other things, but how to riot, how to take over, But this idea is because I think that transnational with Indigenous people is a big, and I know Laverne, I know the Wilma Mankiller, I know my mother, I know this idea because it's not only these borders, as social media and the work that I'm doing in New Zealand right now, the work that I'm doing in Australia right now, the work we're doing in Peru, is we don't have borders. Indigenous people are coming up with answers that non-indigenous people should pay attention to right now because it will benefit us all. So sorry for being long-winded, but thank you. This is remarkable.
Questions? I have one actually. It has to do with just because some people are thinking, so I'll give them a chance to think while I ask this question. You referred to the people who are in the urban centers and how they are transnational and how they might be different. But one of the challenges from a sociological standpoint is that one often focuses on people who are the immigrants, if you want to put it that way. Those who come from the reservations and themselves and move to urban centers. Many people have families, and the children are not the immigrants, and their experience isn't an immigrant experience really. It's an experience of wherever they are. And this is a common story for all immigration, and it's that first generation and second generation from the homeland that struggles about who I am and who I should be. And what I've been very concerned about in Native cultures, both on this side of the border and on the other side of the border, I'm a fluent speaker in my language like you are in yours, but one of my biggest concerns is language and the lack of real knowledge of language for many of our populations. And the notion about what culture will mean when you switch to the language of essentially the colonial, whether that's English or Spanish. And because we all know language has ideas, language has thoughts, language has vision. And that's a big concern. And I worry about that a lot because lots of Native peoples are struggling with this, whether they're on the reservations or in the cities. But my segue into it was your city, and that person who grows up, the child who grows up, yours and I's child, and whose homeland is essentially here, whose distant land is an ancestral land, sort of diasporic, and what tensions that actually brings in that person about not only what they should be, but who they are, and what that means in the future for them. And I guess I think it's complicated for them unless we take them back to some kind of homeland. In other words, unless they experience, and I use this advisedly, unless they experience the same experience of Jews, all of whom came from different parts of the world, but then had to go back to Israel and be integrated into something called a Jew or an Israeli, and had to lose all the German, the Lithuanian, the Spanish, and all the rest, and become fluent in Hebrew. But that's a big transition for our peoples to actually have to go back. And the real big difference for our peoples is that we don't have a lot of resources like you're talking about on those reservations. So I wonder about the hub and where does this all go? My question to you is, the hub is powerful, but how powerful is it in terms of long term?
Well, I think you brought up a lot of really important issues. One of the reasons why I use the concept virtual is because there's a lot going on the internet that, as far as language is concerned. I actually was just teaching about this morning. I had an 8 a.m. course, and I was teaching this book called Yakima Rising, which is an ethnography about the Yakima Nation, and it has a chapter about them revitalizing their language. And I showed this clip of, they had all these really cool cartoons, and then I showed this clip of these little 3-year-olds being able to speak their language, and then they also had classes for elders and the whole range. And the reason why I'm bringing up the internet is because they talked about on that clip that any Yakima can get on their website, and there's all kinds of videos and different curriculum that they can get involved in to start learning their language. And I know for my own tribe, the Winnebago tribe of Nebraska, they do have online courses. I also, this is something that's always fascinated me, the idea of virtual, like the virtual. I ran into a, he's kind of the tech guy for anthropology. But anyway, he works with the computers. And he's working with, in the psychology department, and they really are doing virtual reality. I mean, it's really a trip. And I've always wondered if you could do that for native languages, where you could really get people, you're in this virtual world where people are speaking your language to you, even if you're away from your reservation or your rancheria or wherever, where you could actually have conversations in this kind of virtual world. And I think we're right on the cusp.
You're right on the cusp, because there's 38 tribal colleges. And I'm vice chair of the Board of Trustees for the Blackfeet Community College. Because like when I went to Berkeley, we used to have this term called not to be a poverty pimp. And so my mentors all said, don't be a poverty pimp. You get educated, you make your good paycheck, and you forgot where you came from. So I had this one mentor that would check on me every 5 years and say, are you a poverty pimp? Are you pimping off your people and you haven't helped them? So I went back home, and so we have an app. It's only for iPhones, and it's like a phraselator. Like a phraselator was a weapon that Navy SEALs use, like if they go to Afghanistan. You need to know how to, I'm going to shoot you if you do this, but you had to say it in the language. We're designing the app. I was just sending pictures because we're sending pictures with the app. Siksika in Alberta already has it. So as soon as I put it on, we have Sagapi Times. Everyone off the reservation reads it every day. So that's something else I administer. But what I didn't know how many people look at it every day. And as soon as I put that app, how do I get it? Where can I do it? So like there's 40,000 of us. They all want the app now because they want to start speaking the language. So we're over that cusp. Language, we have an immersion school, and that's based off of New Zealand, Maori, Bulgaria. We've produced 40 fluent speakers from English-speaking homes. But what comes with the language, is something you missed when you were talking, because there's a spirit in the language. And there's a spirit that talks to your soul. And when you can talk from your soul, that's when you belong. And it's not until, and if you are handicapped and can only speak English, you are handicapped. Because you can only think in that language. And your colonization, you're brainwashed if you only think in English. Dude, that's phenomenal. It's spiritual. To learn your language, and it's easier to learn it. And the tribal colleges, since the tribal colleges have emerged since the 1970s, like we can't keep track of our PhDs now. It was the link between they would come to the urban area and they wouldn't get their degree because of the clashing. But now we're the in between. While they go to the university, so now we have over 100 PhDs just in our tribe alone. We have an RN program. We just graduated our first RNs, and they just passed their test. So here's this poor reservation girl or young man that grows up in poverty, gets their RN and starts their first job and makes $80,000 a year. That's happening on the reservation. And see, so I think of this. That's why I say I'm recovering urban, because I always think if I would have stayed in the urban area, what could I have accomplished here? So I saw that today. Because Janet stayed. We're the same. I saw that today with what they designed with Native. So the hub exists everywhere. It's just the resiliency is there, and that's a better story because they tried to wipe us out. They tried to genocide us. Hell no, it didn't happen. I'm here, yeah, and we're still facilitating.
Well,
here.
and we're
Right.
still, and the thing is the idea of the hub, what's so powerful about it is that we travel, and we've always traveled.
Yeah.
We've always traveled. I mean, growing up, we were just gone. I mean, we were just, all my summer was just camping. Camping. I would do the fire. My mother, would cook on her little sterno. She wouldn't buy one of those camp things. She'd only get this little sterno. She was like a depression child. So I don't know if anyone's cooked on those sternos. You know what they are? They're these tiny little things, and that's what she'd cook. Anyway, so my point is that we've always traveled. That's always been the case. And this idea that culture is, that somehow if you go to the city that you're going to be disconnected from who you are as a tribal person is like thinking that somehow our culture is rooted in the land. But the reality is we bring it with us when we travel, and we don't stay still. We just don't. We're constantly traveling.
We're nomadic.
Yeah.
Steve?
I just sort of wanted to point out the other side of this. That is, in particular among the Mixtec, here in California and in Mexico, there are many people who do not speak Spanish. And there are many people who refuse to speak Spanish. And you find that among all of the indigenous in Mexico, the Mayan, etc., are communities that have insulated themselves from Spanish as the colonial language. And those that learn it refuse in their business. So there's already a pride and an anti-colonialism of the community in that. And in fact, I even found that in Europe. There were Algerians living and studying in Yugoslavia who refused to speak French. We spoke French. We needed a translator to speak to them and to have them speak to us because they would refuse to use the colonialist language. So that's another aspect of the integrity, I guess, of what the hub would refer to.
Yes.
Thank you for your presentation and the analysis, but I'd like to offer a complication. I was born and raised in San Jose. That's my home. I was raised by my father to be Mexican. I didn't know until I was in my early 20s that my great-grandfather was native Ohlone from the Almaden area. And I didn't know until about 10 years ago that all my family on my father's side was Ohlone, Ohlone Woodson tribe. So we're not transnational. Tried to be. It didn't work. And the analysis that you present has, to me, two keys in it. One is the relocation of Native people in, I guess, the 60s and 70s was the major time of that movement, to California at least. And the migration of people from south of the border here, usually for migrant labor. The analysis kind of leaves us out, those of us who are not federally recognized, who are Ohlone, for whom this entire Bay Area is our land. And it just struck me and makes me sad.
Well, there is a chapter dedicated to the Muwekma Ohlone.
We're not going to wait, Mike. That's only one part.
No, but I'm just saying that when I wrote the book, it was there was one chapter dedicated to the Muwekma Ohlone and their struggle for federal acknowledgement. There's quite a few people in the book who are mixed, who are both indigenous California and Mexican. So there is a chapter of people who are mixed, who are coming from both those two backgrounds. And the reality of there being tension between the federally acknowledged and the non-acknowledged is definitely highlighted in the book. And the chapter that I wrote about the Mwekmaloni, I took it to Rosemary and to the tribe, and they read it, and they gave me feedback, and they told me whether it was okay, and they approved it. So and then I did that with the different stories, as I would collect the stories and I would ask them and get their feedback. And so the people that I wrote about said what I had written was okay. As far as this idea of the transnational, the way I talk about people who are indigenous to the area, this notion of transnational is that you've been dislocated from your land base. So the fact that you don't have a land base is indeed a transnational existence, even though we are on land that is really indigenous. But the fact that you've been dislocated by the federal government because the treaties were never ratified means you're not on this validated. This is indigenous land, but there is that experience of being transnational because you can't say, this is my land. Get out of this land. So there is that feeling of transnationalism. But thank you for your feedback. It's always a journey writing, and you just basically do the best you can. I hope you read the whole book, and then email me and tell me what you think. I work with Val Lopez quite a bit, and so I really respect the Amamutsan and work very closely. We have a group of us on campus, and we do these meetings at least twice a year, and I'm on the board, and we work together to bring in various speakers that the Amamutsan wants to bring on to campus. So please read the book and let me know what you think. Thank you.
Could I just ask, what do your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren, how do they identify?
I don't have great-grandchildren yet. That's an interesting question.
Yeah, well, so I just, because that's like evolution. So
Right.
how did it, like if I went up to them and said, can you give us help, or whatever, I asked you, who are you? Because that's very important. Because like we're learning with our confederacy that we have to focus on 0 to 3 years old. That 0, so they have to have their Indian name because that's their first transfer right. It's a spiritual thing that they have. So then we want them by the time of 5 or 6. When you ask them who they are, they say Nistu Amskapi Pikani, Nistu Natsitapi. They know who they are, and there's no identity crisis. So what do your children say they are?
Depends on which child we're talking about. Not
Okay.
all of them identify, but I identify as Ohlone Chicano Mestizo, and that's the identity I'm passing along to my children.
Well, we have a bunch of people want to ask some questions, so
So sorry.
Good, you stirred up the pot. That's good.
Well, yeah,
That's
dialogue,
good.
right?
Dialogue.
Before, yes.
Thanks for the talk and the stimulating conversation. I'm wondering, what do you think the impact is of participating in a native hub, in the more limited sense, like one of these symposiums or in a powwow or something, on people's sense of identity? And I imagine it's, in one sense, it's a glorious thing to have all these different tribes and peoples from all these different places coming together.
Mm-hmm.
In other sense, it might, I'm wondering if it might be more of a melting pot than a mixing bowl. Like, maybe they're trying to celebrate their independent, unique, I'm from here, but coming together and celebrating in a way on the basis of their marginalization, on the way of how separated and scattered they are. Does that bring up more of a pan-ethnic, a pan-tribal sort of identity as opposed to reinforcing being Ojibwe or whatever?
Well, you go into these various hubs, and everyone identifies what nation they come from. I say I'm a member of the Winnebago tribe of Nebraska. even though I'm not living on my reservation, I'm identifying that that is what I am. And people that, you know, go to powwows or go to different meetings or are in sweat lodges. I mean, if you go to a sweat lodge, people are speaking their own languages. You're identifying with your own ancestors. If you're dancing at a powwow, you are connecting to your own ancestors. And the regalia you're wearing is, it's validating your own tribal background. So even if you are in where you're with other tribes, it doesn't mean that that takes away from your tribal identity or your connection to your ancestors. I mean, our connection to our ancestors, no matter where we are, we feel that connection. I mean, it's a very spiritual connection. I mean, no matter where I travel, my mother is with me wherever I go. I mean, I'm working on this. Basically, the book I'm writing now, it's a family tribal history. This is the book she wanted to write, but she died before writing it. I'm doing it for her. So I traveled to archives, I went to my reservations, I talked to family members. She's been with me the whole time. My ancestors are with me the whole time. So that's my tribal identity. So that never is taken away from me, no matter where I go. And that's the same. Right now, I'm identifying myself as my tribal nation, and even though I'm here with other people from other backgrounds, it doesn't take away from who I am. I'm proud of where I come from and my ancestors, and they're with me right now.
Thank you so much for your work. I feel like there's not enough on kind of urban Indians, particularly in the Bay Area, so it's really nice to have your work, add to that. But I'm so curious if you could talk about sort of, I guess, contemporary articulations of the hub, particularly how Silicon Valley and the Bay Area has changed so much in the last, 5, 10 years, even the last 2 years, for example. Huge population boom, big kind of tech is even bigger, when this book came out. So I'm sort of curious if you could talk about that in the context of your book and maybe how things have changed, maybe how they're the same, et cetera.
I think the book has even more relevance because of the internet. I mean, now there's Facebook right there near Stanford. I mean, it's just right there. As we were, I picked up my husband from his work, and he goes, "There's Facebook." I'm like, "Oh my God, there's Facebook." I mean, I think there's even more relevance because of the internet. Oh my God. The amount that we connect to this device. I mean, I feel like I'm a cyborg, right? Aren't we kind of a cyborg? And aren't we all part of Facebook? And, the idea of like that we can start having apps where it has our tribal languages on here. Yes. That I can, I've been doing this family tribal history project, and I want my family to read what I'm writing, and I just email it to them. And then they read it on their phones. And then they say, "Okay, that sounds good." "No, page 5, that's a problem." Because of this, it's so incredibly powerful. And I mean, it can, on the one hand, it can be kind of disconnecting. It was funny. This morning, I did this class all about revitalizing native languages. And, I had a group, the students did a presentation, and they were talking about, the thing with this is that it can be connecting but disconnecting. Because you know what I mean? That we could be sitting at a table and we're all just on our phones. So then, there are some issues to it too. But there is also power to it. I mean, basically, this is like a little mini computer. And, I can call to my reservation right now. I could talk to a relative right now, or email, or whatever. So it's just interesting. I think the book and the idea of the hub with the internet, I just think there's even more relevance. Because it's just, I mean, when I wrote the book, I'm trying to remember if I had a cell phone or not. I might have had a little flip phone, maybe. Right? When was the iPhone? When did it start? How old is the iPhone?
Some years, 2007.
Yeah, 6, 7.
So right around when this book, all of a sudden we have this thing. It's pretty intense.
Yes, sir.
Yes, first, thank you for the talk. I'm coming from Europe, from the small country which were occupied and colonized for 800 years. We're lucky to be independent now. So, and we have seen so many small nations inside our country and around our country to die, and also languages.
So what country is it?
Estonia.
Okay.
So in Eastern Europe, so we don't have such experience, but at least something like we can feel what you have been like feeling. So I have the language point is really good. I mean, but I wanted to ask also. We have seen that like singing and the songs is one of the things which is keeping the language alive.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're talking about the smartphones and everything, I have been looking here for the indigenous music, which is like, if you're talking about the indigenous people living in the city environment, and they're transnational. I mean, it's in Europe for the small nations, for the small languages, it's coming more popular to transfer the language to the modern music. And through that they can introduce their language and their culture to their others as well keep their own language alive. But maybe it's just haven't searched from the right place, but haven't found. I mean, that was my question, like how is the situation for the indigenous people here who's living in the city environment, the youngsters? Are they really up to transferring their national music and also the language to the modern environment?
Well, I don't know if, do you still have when I was here, you had the music library and there was this whole thing of Native American music and there was a class. Does that happen anymore? This guy named Professor Black taught it? Well, anyway, there was on this campus, you would go to this library and there'd be all kinds of course then it were albums, right? But all kinds of music from all different tribes, different languages. You could go, you could listen to the music. You can go to a powwow, you can listen to the music. You can get access to all kinds of music. It's available. And so it's definitely doable. Another thing that's been happening, which the person who did the presentation for the class, we end up doing a lot of YouTube videos. Students love YouTube. And the students, they had this YouTube video. It was super cool. It was these hoop dancers, and then it was a combination of the, say, quote-unquote traditional music, but then this kind of electric music in the background. It was so cool. And it was like on YouTube. So the thing is, people are making these videos, and they're just uploading on YouTube all the time. And that's been my experience, is that, I have a granddaughter, she's 14, she's just brilliant. Of course, our grandchildren are brilliant, right? But she's done all kinds of videos, and the videos are a way to, you put them on YouTube, and you can have music, you can have dancing, you can have people speaking languages. I mean, the possibilities are really endless in this, in the kind of hub existence that we're living. So yes, totally. You can totally do that.
Really quick question. I wanted to ask. I've been thinking about it a lot. Times have changed. What's the thing about the recognition of the federal recognition of the tribes? Is it going to change in the?
Well, it's a really difficult issue. The federal government makes it almost impossible to get federal recognition unless you have some sort of political clout. I know Greg Saris Grand Run, they got federal recognition. There's not very, sometimes you get it, but most times you don't. And they make it almost impossible, all the paperwork you have to go through. I mean, it's just crazy. But the Amamutsin, they're just carrying on. They're doing some amazing things. Just to give some, to shout out to the Amamutsin. There's an area, I guess it was BLM land, and now the tribe's going to have access to it. It's oh God, what's it called? Año Nuevo. And it's the site of an indigenous village there. And they're going to start having walks and, to tell the history of that area. And this is a recent thing that came up. There's where the Amamutsin are, the creation story, there's a particular mountain, and you might know the name of the mountain.
Amanam.
Yes, and that the spiritual people go and learn the history of the creation story there. There's a lot of, the tribe is doing language work. So even if they're not federally recognized, there's so much activity going on. They're continuing to teach the young, and just because you're not federally recognized doesn't mean you're not a Native person. Yes.
There's a lot of tribes who are like in Montana who aren't federally recognized, but they still totally operate like Hill 57, the Cree that are down there. But there is a if you're going to study Native Americans in 1934 is a very important time, because that's the IRA, and all of these federally recognized tribes, they couldn't use their government anymore. They had to use the IRA government, which means you elected officials. And now a lot of those tribes are revamping their constitution, like your tribe. Your tribe just recently, because it was fragmentation of blood, because we're the only human beings that are pedigreed on the earth with dogs and horses. But her Ho-Chunk, and because I was working with the tribal council at that time, they revamped their constitution and they counted all of your native blood. So, because the kids were like 5 tribes: Ponca, Lakota, Ho-Chunk, they were Anishinaabe, and they'd be like 5 tribes, so they couldn't enroll anywhere. So that means they don't exist. So that tribe, because of that constitution, said, we're going to count all your Indian blood and you are enrolled as Ho-Chunk. And those constitutions can be told because we're so oppressed and colonized, we don't realize we can change our constitution. Our tribe is right in the middle of it. It's taken about 10 years. But we're revamping our whole constitution, but our biggest stumbling block is between the ones that have more blood, because they don't want us to open the rolls to people who can pass, people who never cared about being Indian. They think that they're going to get something if they are enrolled. But that's our stumbling block.
Which is actually is a threat or a challenge to your hub, basically, that whole thing. Well, yeah, it is. I mean, we don't want to. I want to be aggressive about this, because, this is a nice story, but I'm going to tell you, I can't. They bring my brother in from Mexico to Pascua every year for ceremonies, because he lives in the Yaqui area in Mexico. And he lives there 6 months a year. He can't have his children enrolled. Why? Because it's about money. It's about the casino and who gets the money. And myself the same. And also, let's become clear about this language issue. Yes, it's maybe spiritual, but unless we speak it every day, it's not functional. And let's become clear. You go to any Native American tribal council, and what do they speak in? Almost 9% of them. English. I know, I've been to most of them. English. Now, one of them, they have people who are native speakers like she is, but do they speak in their language? No. They speak in English. Go figure.
that's definitely in particular certain nations because, I mean,
I haven't seen one, and one of the most nationalistic of the tribes, the Apache. 12% of that on that reservation, which I work with, speak any language that is functional. And 6% of the youth. I mean, I don't know about you, but I worry about that.
Our statistic is like it takes 50 years to completely die out the language. If the situation is so bad, that happened.
We're all concerned. She's concerned. I'm concerned. We're all concerned. Well, we are concerned. Because I take her point. It's not only spiritual, but it's, I mean, I liken this to kind of Jewish thing. That's why I get a lot of things. Because in Jewish thing, they always spoke Hebrew at the temple, but they didn't speak Hebrew every day. I mean, there's things about how many people will learn and then say, if I can speak to my group, and they're fluent in it, do I just make a couple if it was Spanish and somebody said, "Oh, ¿cómo está?" And then after that we switched to English. Somehow we connected. What is it? I'm concerned about Native peoples. I'm concerned about this language. I want the hub to work. I want the hub, wherever it is, the urban area or the rural area, to work.
And his case in point is important because for tribes that have treaties, there's a loophole in most treaties that if you don't have a fluent language speaker, the treaty is abrogated.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we have to look to the bigger world. Okay, so let's take Maori. The Maori people, in 1980, only 20% of their people spoke Maori. And that's when they started the language nests, and they would just take children in their diapers and they would put them with a fluent speaker. And that evolved they brought it into the school system. So by 2004, 80% of them could speak Maori.
Yeah.
I just came from there. I just spent a month, and I saw the off product of a 12-year-old that was fluent. And so when you go sign up to go to school, public schools, there's a category for English only and bicultural, and she signs up for bicultural. She was fluent. She knew all the stories. She was 12 years old. Then I met a 23-year-old who could speak the language fluently, who navigates by the stars, and has paddled to Easter Island, and his goal is to paddle to Hawaii, which is their original land. So the Apsalaga, the Crow, their tribal council meetings all in their language. The Navajo, it's all, the biggest tribe is all in their language. I say that as we colonize, you will have the immersion in this hub idea is she's correct.
Yeah.
She's correct because it is spiritual and you will still be who you are and we'll figure it out. But what the greatest weapon of the oppressors is the oppressed mind. And that's true. Our greatest enemy is some of our own people who think white. That's our greatest enemy.
I got two questions, and why don't you just ask them? And she's consented, you and the person in the back. There'll be a last two questions, so you just ask the questions, and then she's going to answer both.
Yeah, I'll keep it brief. Thank you for the talk, and I'm just one of your comments kind of got me thinking. That you talk about the land-based versus land people who are not land-based, and the hub to create a space. It got me thinking about the literature. It's always great, exciting to bring in interdisciplinary dialogue. So I was thinking about the literature on indigenous knowledge, which a lot of them are talking about how that knowledge is intrinsically connected to land. So I'm wondering how does the hub, whether it has a role or how it creates space for the practice, however you define it.
Okay.
You know what? I forgot my question, but I just wanted to say I was dealing with my parking, but I just wanted to say that I think we're at like a really amazing time right now because I was listening to what Guido was saying about tribes as indigenous nations where we have sovereignty, that innate sovereignty, and to be able to treat with one another like that and be able to make agreements with one another outside of like the U.S. government, outside of the Canadian government. I think like right in there, I see like an answer to like enrollment or federal recognition and stuff like that. Because before we were colonized, like none of us were federally recognized, you know?
Right.
And, you know, and I think in being in relationship with other Native peoples, like, you know, I look at them and I say, I recognize you. You know, I see who you are. I see you as a Native person. And so we have that power, you know. And if we like the, you know, like I know California tribes, just a little bit about like revenue sharing and stuff like that. If they're paying tribes to not have casinos, you know, like we have like all of these things with like resources, you know, casinos, all these different areas where, you know, we have that power to, the potential to have that power to kind of, you know, recognize one another and empower one another. I just wanted to say that.
Okay, so this notion of the hub, I mean, we can carry the hub whether we're living on a reservation or in the urban area. We're constantly making hubs, no matter where we go. And the idea of the hub is just that, I mean, really, our land got mapped by colonialism. And we got fixed into particular areas because of colonialism. That was the way to disenfranchise us. Because, I mean, really, all this land was indigenous land. And then there were certain areas, okay, this is the, you know, Ho-Chunk area, this is the Amamutsan area, this is... But it was, we could still carry who we were and travel with this idea of the hub. But we can have the hub when I go back to Winnebago, I still have the idea of the hub because I'm there, but I'm still feeling connected to over here. And so it's just a different way of thinking about culture, community, identity, and belonging, that you can bring it with you no matter where you go, whether you're in the urban area, the reservation. You could go to, you know, New Zealand and you still have the hub. It's just with you all the time. Colonialism tried to, the federal boarding schools, the relocation program, they all had this idea.
Yeah, those political boundaries and mapping, but I'm not referring to that. I'm referring to, say, ecology. So it's a different kind of, I'm not talking about those boundaries that you're referring to, either made by colonialists or by nation states. So I'm not speaking about.
Okay, so you're thinking more about our relationship to the land, nature.
Yeah, so in one word, probably ecology would be a better
Ecosystems, yeah.
Ecosystems.
Right.
Ecosystems,
So that's
yeah.
why I'm referring to.
Well, and you know what's really interesting about that is that we're actually, part of colonization was the colonizer brought their livestock, they brought the bees, they brought, I have graduate students that are doing this stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, they brought the insects, they brought all these things
STDs.
that cause all these problems where, you know what I mean, you have these invasive species and so that idea of you know, part of the colonization process was the colonizer actually brought things that would actually be part of the colonizing process. And we're dealing with that now, where you have things that are not really supposed to be in different locations, and then it pushes out the natural, what's supposed to be naturally there. So what you brought up is actually, if you're thinking about that, it's causing a lot of problems. You know, we're in the middle of climate change. There's all kinds of things happening.
Quick question.
Yes.
What happens if there is no connection to land? When there is no connection to land, when there is no land? Because your whole work is based on transnationalism, is coming back to the reservation, is a connection with the reservation, the Pueblo de Monteria. But it's this connection that explains the hub, this sense of belonging, even if you are away. What happens if there is no land here?
Well, the idea of that.
I don't know, there's a lot of there's no recognizable tribe. You know what I mean? When there's no land, there's only the.
Well, but even if, say, people who here in California, so many of the tribes don't have a land base because the treaties were not ratified. But this is still their land. It's still their land, regardless of who's living on it. We still have a spiritual connection to our land, regardless if other people are living there or not. So I was giving you examples of what the Amamutsun are doing. There's a particular mountain, which is their creation story. They go up there and they pray. And it doesn't matter that, okay, they don't own it, like in a private property kind of sense, but they go there and they pray and they connect to their ancestors, and it's still their land, regardless of who actually has the land or doesn't have the land. So another example was I was talking about Año Nuevo, which is over there on, there's all these sea lions there, whatever, but the ancestors are still there. Whether other people, it doesn't matter. It's like the part of the, I did a film as well as a book about my grandparents, and part of it is we went to some boarding schools. You feel the ancestors of those children who died there. The ancestors are there. Regardless of what colonialism has done, you can still connect to the ancestors. Regardless of who's living there, it's still your land.
Well, we're going to have to end here, and let me thank Professor Ramirez for a wonderful talk. And